there, welcome back. So today I am working on some straight sword techniques, the uppercut and the parry. The intention of today's training is to add intention to my straight sword movements. Wushu is kind of a confused art form in that all of the movements were inherited from movements that had martial application, but over the years, Wushu kind of formed its own microcosm where it kept developing but diverging from the martial application roots, and so it's pretty common nowadays for Wushu athletes to be doing movements and learning movements without really thinking about the intention behind them. I would say for most of my Wushu training, I knew and loved Wushu, really agnostic to the martial intent, in that I thought the movements were so beautiful, I wanted to make them better and better, but I didn't really ever deeply consider what the movements were doing. As I started to train more fight choreo and Muay Thai, I began to see that some, especially old school athletes, move with intention behind their movements. Like they're actively trying to cut something, everything is doing something as they do it. And I want to add that dimension to my Wushu because I think that it's cooler. It's a little bit windy and cold out there, so I'm just gonna warm up in here and then get out there. Okay, actually I lied. There wasn't enough space to warm up inside, so I'll just warm up outside. So I recently did a private lesson with this coach named Jing. Jing was former Beijing Wushu team, came to the States, and is now one of the most successful Wushu stunt people in the industry. You may have seen her in Everything Everywhere All at Once. She is absolutely incredible. She recently posted some Wushu tutorials about where to put your intention in some of these straight sword movements, especially the uppercut and the parry. And now I'm gonna practice some of the techniques that we worked on and really be able to pronounce the intention of each movement. You may hear the wind picking up, so I recently heard this poem that inspired my Taiji teacher's Taiji teacher to train Tai Chi. It beautifully captures the feeling of training through seasons. It has this line, "练剑斩寒光," sword practice cuts through winter light. So at this point, I'm thinking about that line, romanticizing training through the elements. It actually started to get quite a bit unpleasant. It turns out these poems are not really practical. Okay, it's really windy. I'm going back in. Then, being back inside, I didn't have enough space to actually train, so I went outside again. The wind was blowing so bad that I kept hitting myself with my sword because the blade was blowing around. Okay, it is definitely too windy outside to do straight sword, and I tried in here, there's not enough space, so this is also just the general experience, I think, of training Wushu without a Wushu school, is that you never have a good place to train. So I am gonna pack up my stuff and go try the community center, I think. I'm kind of annoyed right now. I went to the community center next door, but it was closed. Then I went to the gym, which was packed. And then I went to the other part of the gym, which is actually quite a nice open space, but it's usually used for gym stuff. I was able to carve out a little corner for myself, re-warm up, and get to work. The first movement that I worked on is called guajian, or sword parry. As I learned from working with Sifu Jing, you're actively blocking every time you bring your sword down. That's what I was trying to think about. I think it's looking a lot more intentional, but I still get a little bit stuck on the body turns. I also worked on liao jian, or straight sword uppercut. There's supposed to be a moment every time you do this move where the sword is supposed to be coming into contact with something to block or cut upwards. Though I'm going kind of offline, I think that this movement is starting to look and feel a lot better for me, so I started to work it into combos. Finally, I realized that my chuanjian, or threading sword, kept getting stuck because my hips are so tight, so I worked on that a bit, especially stretching through my stances. Then I wrapped up my training and stretched some more. You can see that even though I have my splits, my back hip never really wants to open up, so that's what I was working on. This was not my most productive training session, and to be honest, I was pretty frustrated to have had to migrate so many times. Sometimes it feels like, everything in the world is trying to keep you from practicing. I know this sounds really whiny. One of my motivations for sharing this is that it's the honest experience of wushu training, and I figured it would be pretty relatable. I haven't figured out my own resolution yet, but in the meantime, despite the frustration, I am almost always happier when I train even a little bit than when I don't, so I will keep doing this for now.